Postecoglou spoke afterwards, Jurgen, about how the atmosphere did affect the players. He said, look, when we've scored late goals, we've been lifted by the crowd. It's because it was much flatter today because what was at stake. He says it did translate to what happened on the pitch. Can you empathise with that?
Yeah, I can emphasize with that because nobody at Spurs wants Arsenal to win the title. Period. That's just the way it is, you know. And maybe they say, no, we'd rather have Man City win it today, you know, and go back home and have fish and chips and yeah, call it a day, and give away the game because it is the main rival is Arsenal. They look mainly at Arsenal and that makes it a very kind of tricky situation in the stadium, in the atmosphere. They're maybe not as pushy as they usually would be to kind of give you the energy and give you the stimulation to go at Man City and to create more chances. And it took the Spurs a long time. I mean, they had only one chance in the first half, and then obviously the chances that Ortega then saved in the second half. But yeah, it makes a difference. Ange is totally right saying that.
Convenient excuse, is it?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it's anything to do with the crowd. I don't quite understand it all. Yeah, geographically, it's a huge rival. It's a big rivalry because there's only a few miles between them and North London. But let's be honest about it. It hasn't really many times been a rivalry because Arsenal have been dominant. It's a bit like Manchester United and Man City. Now it's the blue half are clearly flying. But for years and years and years, City were yo-yoing between the leagues. You know, worry about what you're doing. If Arsenal, you had to win this game. Like, Heung-min Son is not missing that chance on purpose. Do you know what I'm saying? They wanted to win the game. The fans wanted them to win the game. There was still an outside chance of the Champions League. Right? This parochial sort of tribalism is... I kind of understand it in a way. It's almost like, you know, an excuse. Well, you know, we didn't want to win that game anyway because we're going to stop. What Arsenal are doing and what others are doing is to be admired. And I think Spurs have to try and worry about themselves, which their manager will, and reach that level. But in terms of a rivalry, I think Spurs need to give their head a wobble. They're aspiring to do some of the things that Arsenal have done in the last, I don't know how many years. I mean, obviously it's been a barren spell for Arsenal since the great Wenger years, but boy, they're on whether they win the league or not, they are on their way back.
Frank, would this muted atmosphere have affected you as a player?
If I was a Tottenham player, no, not really. I mean, you have to do your job. I mean, you play for your colour. You are paid by the club, and you don't care about the rivalry. You play at home. You want to win. You have your pride, you have your ego, and at the end of the day, especially if you have to play for maybe a spot in Champions League next season, you don't care about that rivalry. You play, you do it, and you don't need the fans. I mean, I played the same way I played my game in front of 2,000 people than in front of 80,000 people because I was playing for my club and for my teammates and for the fans who were there, but never because of some calculation about what could have happened and who could please the fans or not. I think it never bothered me. I always wanted to win a game. And it's like West Ham. West Ham have to fight to maybe get a draw because it's part of their job and you cannot feint playing.
Let's talk about then the odds going into the final day of the season. It will surprise no one that Manchester City are heavy favourites. That's interesting. 35-2 odds. That means you have to put on $35 to win $2. Arsenal, meanwhile, come in at 9-1. Stevie's pulling a face. You can't see it.
Well, you look at West Ham. You look at West Ham's. You look at the head-to-head going up to the Etihad.
Yeah.
I think it was 3-0 last year. There's been certainly looking back the last 4 or 5 visits, there's been no, I don't think, unless I missed some, been no victories. There's been a couple of close calls where City have won by the odd goal. But it's hard to see. But I mean, I go back to the year where Mancini won the title when Aguero scored that late goal. Everybody thought, including the Man City fans probably, that they were turning up for a procession. A foregone conclusion, right? Man United were at Sunderland. Man City were playing QPR. who, by the way, had Joey Barton sent off in the first half for stupidity. This was all going to be a walk in the park. And it was anything but. So you can never, ever say this is... And by the way, West Ham are a much better team. QPR were fighting to avoid relegation that day. So you just can't say this is a matter of turning up and rolling them over.
That's why the 35 to 1-2 seems way wrong.
Right.
Way wrong. I'm with Craig entirely. We've seen in this game tonight, and I know it's different when you're away from home to when you're at home, but we've seen that as good as we think Man City are, they can be affected by the situation, because there's no question in the first half they were. The passing was off, and you can only put it down to a little bit of tension. And so, even though they're at home against West Ham, there has to be tension there. And if there's a team that you really don't, you know, who could be spoilers, it's West Ham. You know, from nowhere they get results against teams because they got some pace going forward and they can steal goals. So I'm just a little surprised at the odds.
Well, you might have had
no question they're favourites. They're big favourites, but they're not 35 to 1-2 favourites.
Well, you were on the field when that, I don't want to bring it up, but the Liverpool-Arsenal game, right? The crowd, all right, this was two great sides. Liverpool are at home, and I don't think they could believe what happened. I have never seen the disbelief on supporters' faces that I saw that day.
Yep.
Mancini was on his knees, and I mean on his knees in the touchline, right? Almost in tears. It'd gone. They'd blown it. And I was looking at the Man City fans, both beneath the commentary position and on the monitors on the other side. They couldn't believe it. And so the great thing is about all sports is that these things can happen. And the nerves, the emotions, and I think that's for, if you're in the Arsenal camp, you say, look, we have to go out and dispose of Everton, right? The last thing we want to do is throw up some anomaly of a result. Everton beat us at home and City somehow lose. So they have to go out, dispatch this Everton side, and then they can't do any more than that. But it's not it is far from a foregone conclusion.
Now, we've got a lot of time, of course, between now and then to discuss that. Just a word
I'm not talking about that again.
Well, I'm not going to ask you.
Who's going to be talking about it?
I don't know, someone else, not you.
Well, who?
You just sit in the corner quietly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Jurgen, just a word on Spurs, obviously. Started the season so well with that unbeaten run. It has somewhat come apart, hasn't it, towards the end of the season. How would you sum it up, this first campaign in charge for Postecoglou?
I think I would sum it up very positive still. I mean, obviously, they were leading in the beginning of the season, and that gave big, big hopes to all Spurs supporters. Oh, maybe we are in the run for the title, but everyone that is realistic knew that, you know, getting into the top four would be fantastic. Being now fifth and finishing fifth in the table is still a very positive result, I think. He's done a lot of good work. He obviously has a philosophy of play that comes above everything that he often talks about. I think they have to do some work in the off season, you know, and get some 2, 3, 4 quality players into that roster to make him a little bit more competitive also for Europe. Overall, I think a positive season. In the beginning, they dreamed of more, but I think overall it's okay.